the Prime Minister, and then 15 minutes for the ministers. Monsieur Trudeau, à vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis très content d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui, accompagné effectivement de la ministre Ng pour une brève allocution et avec les ministres Tassi et Duclos pour répondre à vos questions. On est ici aujourd'hui pour vous parler de ce qu'on fait pour continuer de vous soutenir et de vous protéger pendant ces moments difficiles. On Monday night, we had our 36th First Ministers meeting since the beginning of this pandemic. It was an important and constructive conversation in which we came together to respond to this very difficult Omicron wave that is hitting across the country, particularly in terms of its impact on our healthcare workers and systems. We talked about vaccines, we talked about rapid tests, we talked about procurement of treatments and a number of other issues. We continue to work together across all orders of government to support Canadians, to support our health workers, and to make sure that our economy is able to come roaring back once this wave comes through. On vaccines and boosters, we now, as people know, have enough vaccine supply in this country to make sure that everyone can get fully vaccinated. We continue to bring in doses for any future needs that science and experts will dictate to us. We've advanced 1.8 million doses of Pfizer into January for a total of 6.8 million Pfizer doses in January for Canadians aged 12 and over. So it's really important that everyone get their booster when it's time for you to do so. We have more than 10 million boosters already administered across the country. So if you haven't, please go get your shot. It's never too late to do the right thing. And I can tell you that when you show up to get your very first shot in your local vaccine clinic or your pharmacy, the pharmacists, the healthcare workers will be incredibly pleased to be able to give you your first shot. It is about doing the right thing. They'd much rather be giving you an injection of a vaccine to keep you and everyone safe than having to deal with you in a critical care bed. Please, it's time to get vaccinated. It's time to get your boosters. We notice as well that only about 45% of Canadian kids between 5 and 12 years old have been vaccinated. With schools still virtual, but eventually in many places still virtual and in many places returning soon, we need to make sure that kids are getting vaccinated. Quand je suis parti ce matin pour venir à cette conférence de presse, je suis allé vérifier mes 3 enfants qui étaient chacun dans leur chambre sur ordinateur et iPad en train de faire de l'école virtuelle. On sait que ça va finir bientôt. On veut que tout le monde soit vacciné. S'il vous plaît, encouragez vos amis, vos voisins de se faire vacciner et de faire vacciner leurs enfants. Vaccines work. They work to protect you. They work to protect the vulnerable people around you. They also work to support our frontline healthcare workers who are in danger of being overwhelmed by this Omicron wave. So we're not just supporting them. We're supporting the people who are at risk of seeing important surgeries and treatments canceled because our health systems are getting overrun. We need to continue to do what we know we can do. That is, stay safe, be careful in your gatherings, in your distancing, wear a mask, and yes, remember to continue to get vaccinated. On that, I want to thank once again our extraordinary frontline health workers and everyone working in public health for the incredible work they've done over the past 2 years. This pandemic is dragging on, and it's exhausting for everyone, but it's particularly difficult for those health workers who have been going flat out for the past 2 years to try and keep everyone safe, to try and get us through this. Please do everything we can to protect them. They deserve not just our thanks, our deepest gratitude, but our support. And that means getting the boosters, getting the vaccinations, getting our kids vaccinated so we can get through this. Je veux aussi parler du soutien qu'on continue à offrir à nos entreprises, à nos petites entreprises, à nos travailleurs. La pandémie n'est pas terminée, alors on continue d'être là pour les Canadiens, comme on l'a promis depuis les débuts de cette pandémie. On a du soutien en cas de confinement, on a la subvention salariale. On vous rappelle que la subvention salariale est là pour vous aider à garder vos employés, même si vous êtes en fonction réduite. C'est important de garder ce lien avec les employés. C'est important de pouvoir permettre aux employés de continuer à payer leur loyer, à mettre de la nourriture sur la table pour leur famille, mais aussi de pouvoir revenir le plus rapidement possible une fois que cette vague sera terminée. La reprise économique rapide, on sait que c'est important pour le bien-être économique de tout notre pays. Donc, utilisez cette subvention salariale, elle est là pour vous. Mais les petites entreprises ont aussi besoin de plus de flexibilité. C'est pour ça qu'on va annoncer aujourd'hui, on annonce aujourd'hui qu'on prolonge le délai de remboursement pour les prêts du compte d'urgence pour les entreprises canadiennes. So to support small businesses, we are there with measures like the wage subsidy. I want to remind employers that the wage subsidy is retroactive. So if you're making decisions right now about whether to keep people on through the coming weeks or not, know that that wage subsidy will be there to help you. We want to be able to have people continue to be tied to their jobs so that we can bounce back quicker once this wave is gone and we start reopening. People need the support to be able to keep food on the table. That's why that wage subsidy and the rent subsidy is there, offered by the federal government, to help you make it through this difficult wave. We're also announcing today that we're extending the Canada Emergency Business Account, the CEBA, for eligible borrowers to the end of 2023. Minister Ng will have more details, but the bottom line is, of course, this. We will continue to be there to have people's backs with as much as it takes, with as long as it takes, until we get through this pandemic. I want to end today by speaking directly to kids once again. I know many of you are in virtual school again. Many of you have made more sacrifices over Christmas, over the holidays, not seeing your friends, not seeing your loved ones, having to hunker down, having to help out around the house as your parents are working virtually. This is not easy. And I know almost half of kids across this country have gotten their vaccine from ages 5 to 12. We need to get more. So please ask your parents if you can get vaccinated. Getting vaccinated protects yourself, protects your family, protects your grandparents, protects vulnerable people, but it also supports our frontline workers who are working incredibly hard, our nurses and doctors and people in hospitals who are dealing with a rise in cases. We know, kids across this country, you've been doing the right things over these past long years, and it sucks, but you've been amazing, and we need to keep doing everything we can to get through this. Je compte sur vous, je compte sur tout le monde à travers le pays de continuer à faire les bonnes affaires, même si on est fatigué, même si on est tanné. On va continuer de faire les bonnes choses pour se protéger, pour assurer que notre pays, notre économie continue à bien fonctionner et qu'on sera toujours capable d'être là les uns pour les autres en faisant les bonnes choses. Je vous remercie de votre attention ce matin. Je suis maintenant très content de céder la parole à la ministre Ng. Mary.
Merci, Premier Ministre. As workers and small businesses and people across the country face renewed uncertainty and with new lockdowns, rising case counts, and the Omicron variant, we continue to know that the best thing for our economy is to support our workers and businesses through this pandemic. I want to thank the millions of Canadians who have stepped up, who have made sacrifices and continue to follow public health measures, including getting their vaccines and their booster shots. And to Canadian small businesses, you have shown incredible resilience throughout this pandemic, and our government will continue to be there for you to support you as we have over the past 2 years. Supports including the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and rent subsidies, And now the lockdown program and the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, this has helped millions of businesses and workers across the country to get through this pandemic. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the 170 chambers of commerces, the boards of trades, and others across Canada for your help. You've helped to distribute millions of rapid tests from our government to small businesses and workplaces across Canada. Over 15 million tests have been provided to businesses across the country so far, with millions to come. Rapid tests are one of the many tools that we have to fight this pandemic and to support our businesses. Nous avons toujours dit que nous vous conduirons vers le fin de cette pandémie et nous le ferons. Today, as the Prime Minister has already mentioned, in recognition of the challenges that many of our businesses are facing with these renewed lockdowns, we are extending the repayment deadline for the Canada Emergency Business Account Loans, or otherwise called CEBA, and also for the CEBA equivalent lending that is provided through the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. We're going to extend to eligible borrowers. They will be able to have until December 31st of 2023 now to repay their loan. We've heard from businesses that they're looking for this flexibility, and that's what today's announcement is about. This additional year will help businesses get that flexibility and continue to work together through this pandemic to the end of this pandemic. I want everyone to know that we're going to continue to have your backs through this pandemic as we drive for a strong and inclusive and a sustainable economic recovery for everyone. Merci beaucoup.
So now we'll go to questions. So we only have 20 minutes. We have, I think, 5 questions in the room, starting with the mic to the left.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, Ministers. Thank you for taking our questions today. On the proposed issue of this tax or fee for the unvaccinated in Quebec, do you think, Prime Minister, this is the right or legal way to approach this problem? And is this something that you would consider looking at implementing federally?
Obviously, like people across the country, we've received that proposal with interest by the Quebec government, but there's a lot more details that we have to hear on how this would work before I can make any comments on it. But I will remind people that we have been clear at the federal level about how important it is to get vaccinated, and we brought in very strong measures to ensure that travelers across the country need to be fully vaccinated. People coming into the country need to be fully vaccinated, that the federal public service needs to be fully vaccinated. These are things that we have continued to move forward on because the best path forward is vaccination, which is why at the federal level, the fact that there is still a debate being brought forward by the Conservative Party saying that we need to be more accommodating of people who choose not to get vaccinated is, I think, exactly the wrong thing. Mr. O'Toole is out to try and protect his own leadership, and he's not thinking about protecting the healthcare workers who are on the front lines. We know very different jurisdictions are making different decisions about how to encourage people to get vaccinated, and as a federal government, we will be continuing to be there to support them in those decisions and to make sure that everyone gets vaccinated. Évidemment, nous attendons plus de détails sur la proposition du Québec, mais nous êtes certainement là pour continuer à encourager les gens de se faire vacciner. On sait que de passer à travers cette pandémie, ça va exiger que le plus grand nombre de gens possible se fassent vacciner. C'est pour ça qu'on a pris des mesures pour exiger la vaccination obligatoire pour ceux qui veulent voyager dans ce pays, pour les travailleurs de la fonction publique. Et nous allons continuer d'être là pour appuyer les provinces qui prennent des mesures supplémentaires.
Just following up on your comments about Mr. O'Toole, he says that you're incentivizing and normalizing lockdowns, and by demonizing the unvaccinated, you're pushing them further away from getting the shot. I'm wondering if you can comment a bit more on these allegations, and also whether or not you think that the government and you personally need to take another approach here when it comes to those who clearly, at this point in the pandemic, are not getting the shot.
We have continued to work in many, many different ways to encourage people to get vaccinated, whether it's public information campaigns, whether it's local and peer leadership to encourage people in different languages, in their communities, to get vaccinated. We've continued to put forward strong incentives to be vaccinated. If you want to get on a plane, if you want to get on a train, if you want to travel internationally, these are the kinds of things that encourage people to get vaccinated. And I can tell you that there continue to be people showing up in vaccination clinics to get their first shots, including this week. This is something we will continue to encourage. Quite frankly, on the Conservative side, trying to pretend that rapid testing or testing in general is as good as getting vaccinated is simply irresponsible. Mr. O'Toole is more focused on appeasing the anti-vaxxers within his own caucus than he is on protecting Canadians, and certainly than on supporting frontline workers. If Mr. O'Toole was serious about being a leader to get Canadians through this pandemic, he would start by making sure that all of his MPs get vaccinated.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Prime Minister, I hear you say that you're waiting for more details from Quebec before weighing in, but you've also highlighted the steps that you have taken federally in terms of unvaccinated people not being allowed to get on a plane or a train. So I'm wondering, how far are you willing to go at the federal level, and are you considering any mechanism of making an unvaccinated person pay for more health care or via tax, just the idea of it?
We've moved forward on some very strong incentives. If someone wants to get on a plane or get on a train, they now have to be vaccinated. There's no way around that. If you want to work for the federal public service, you need to be vaccinated. These are areas that are in control of the federal government, and these are measures that are strong that we've brought in, that the Conservative Party, for example, continues to disagree with, but we know that the vast majority of Canadians stand with. I continue to work with health experts to look at how we can encourage more and more people to get vaccinated, to get their boosters, to continue to get their kids vaccinated. But I will highlight that Canada is doing better than most countries around the world in terms of rates of vaccination. Canadians have continued to step up and do the right things, and it is something that I think we can all take pride in, the fact that Canadians have shown so unequivocally, for the most part, that we are there for each other. But I'm happy to turn it over to the Minister of Health, who is, of course, looking at more ways of encouraging Canadians to get vaccinated.
Yes, I agree entirely with what the Prime Minister said. First, we are waiting for details on the measure announced yesterday by the government of Quebec. Second, I exchanged with my colleagues over the last few weeks and just recently with the Quebec minister, and we are all on board when it comes to supporting universality of access to health care across Canada. This being said, we need to remind everyone, as the Prime Minister just said, that vaccination is the way out of this wave and out of the crisis in general. It works. You know, science has been telling us that for many, many months now, and we have demonstrated at the federal level that vaccine mandates also work. 99% of public servants, almost 99% of public servants at the federal level are either fully vaccinated or soon to be fully vaccinated. Let's remember that just a few months ago, there are some people in Canada, in other parties in particular, that doubted the ability and the willingness of public servants to get vaccinated, to protect themselves and to protect others. 99% have done that now. And the same thing for RCMP, armed forces. We are mandating vaccination for all workers under federal regulation. That is almost 8% of total workers in Canada. We have, the Prime Minister said, we have mandated vaccination for transport by airplane or by train. We are using all the tools that we have at the federal level, not only to encourage more vaccination, but also to protect people. I would say that the key word here is benevolence. We need to look after each other, and we need to protect everyone from this terrible disease, which can be deadly, and that comes with vaccination.
Prime Minister, on booster rates in a number of provinces remain quite low compared to first and second doses, a number at or close to 30%. I'm wondering, with the information that you're getting, how much that is attributed to just the rollout process versus Canadians who don't, for whatever reason, want to get a booster dose, and if you're considering extending the measures you keep referencing in terms of planes and trains and federal workplace mandates to include a third dose as part of the definition.
Our decisions around vaccine mandates and requirements and what constitutes being fully vaccinated, those will be based on science, will be based on the recommendations of experts going forward. Right now, we continue to encourage Canadians to get their booster shots. Our job at the federal level is to make sure we're procuring enough vaccines so everyone can get the booster shots, can get their kids vaccinated. We have done that. And further, we're working to support provinces that need extra help on getting those boosters into arms. We've seen time and time again how Canadians have stepped up to be there for each other, to do the right thing, to protect their vulnerable loved ones, but also to protect our healthcare workers and our frontline workers. I know Canadians are continuing to do the right things because these booster shots will protect us and make sure that we can get back to the things we love even quicker.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau. Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Je comprends que vous attendez plus de détails de Québec, mais sur le principe, là, est-ce que vous êtes d'accord avec l'idée que les non-vaccinés paient plus cher pour le système de santé, pour les frais de santé?
Au niveau du gouvernement fédéral, on a déjà amené des mesures qui sont très dures pour les gens qui ne sont pas vaccinés. De ne pas pouvoir voyager en avion ou en train, de risquer de perdre sa job si on travaille pour la fonction publique et on choisit de ne pas se faire vacciner. On a démontré une rigueur et une approche très ferme sur les vaccinations. En même temps, on sait que différentes juridictions sont en train de regarder différentes mesures qui vont aussi encourager la vaccination. Évidemment, les détails vont être importants pour cette proposition du Québec parce que on veut s'assurer que les principes de la loi canadienne sur la santé soient respectés. Mais comme le ministre de la Santé a dit, on sait très bien que le Québec s'y tient aussi aux principes de cette loi canadienne sur la santé. Mais nous allons regarder les détails de comment ça va se dérouler pour continuer à pouvoir encourager et démontrer aux gens qui hésitent encore de se faire vacciner que la bonne chose à faire, c'est de se faire vacciner.
Est-ce que vous êtes d'accord sur le principe? Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est une bonne chose de faire payer aux non-vaccinés plus cher?
Je pense qu'on doit toujours regarder les incitatifs qui vont fonctionner pour les gens et les détails sont extrêmement importants sur comment ça va fonctionner comme incitatif ou comme encouragement. C'est pour ça que je ne peux pas me prononcer plus que ça, mais je peux dire que nous avons pris des mesures extrêmement fermes et même difficiles dans le domaine fédéral pour encourager, pour vraiment rendre la vie difficile pour ceux qui choisissent de ne pas se faire vacciner, qui ne pourront pas voyager à bord d'un train ou d'un avion. C'est des genres de choses que nous devons faire pour assurer que les gens fassent le bon choix pour se faire vacciner. Donc, on cherche à les inciter, on cherche à les encourager et on va continuer de le faire dans le respect de nos principes et de nos valeurs.
Si je peux me permettre rapidement.
Oui,
si je peux me permettre rapidement de compléter.
Je vais juste répondre en anglais, puis je vais te passer la parole. As a country, different jurisdictions and the federal government have taken many strong measures to encourage Canadians to get vaccinated. And quite frankly, Canadians have stepped up themselves to one of the highest rates of vaccination in the world because we know this is the way to get through it. And for people who continue to hesitate or to choose not to get vaccinated, they are losing privileges to do certain things, whether it's get on a train or a plane, whether it's travel internationally, whether it's move forward in a job in the public service or even have a job in the public service. We have been taking strong measures from the very beginning. And yes, we know that there is continued debate on this. The Conservative Party of Canada continues to resist measures to encourage people to get vaccinated. They not even choosing to get vaccinated themselves. But at the federal level, we've taken some very strong measures. At the provincial levels, they're looking at measures that will work for them. This Quebec proposal is something that obviously everyone is paying attention to right now, but there are still many details to know. And the details will be important in how this works, how it balances the values and the rights that we all cherish as Canadians with the necessity of keeping people safe. Vaccines are about keeping Canadians safe, continuing to get through this pandemic the best possible way. And various orders of government are right to look at different ways of encouraging and incentivizing people to get vaccinated.
Ce que j'allais ajouter en français, c'est en complément à ce que le Premier ministre a dit lorsqu'il a parlé de valider l'effet des mesures sur les taux de vaccination, sur la protection donc que les gens se donnent lorsqu'ils se font vacciner. Et ce que l'on sait, par exemple, depuis quelques semaines et depuis quelques mois, en fait, c'est que depuis l'été, depuis que les provinces et les territoires ont commencé à mettre en place des obligations vaccinales pour aller dans les gymnases, dans les restaurants, dans les bars, depuis que le gouvernement canadien a aussi mis en place des obligations vaccinales, le taux de vaccination a été accru à peu près entre 6 et 10 %. Les estimés varient. Donc, c'est 6 à 10 % de plus de Canadiens qui ont choisi de se protéger et se faire vacciner en raison de ces obligations vaccinales. Ça veut dire qu'il y a des millions de Canadiens maintenant qui sont protégés parce qu'ils ont fait le bon choix et se sont vaccinés en raison de l'impact de ces mesures sur les décisions qu'ils ont pu prendre. Et on est dans une situation avec le Omicron qui est très compliquée, mais qui serait encore beaucoup plus compliquée si on avait, par exemple, 2 à 3 millions de Canadiens additionnels qui ne seraient pas vaccinés présentement.
Hey, Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. I'm asking a question on behalf of my colleague Avery Haynes with W5 for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. On the issue of whistleblower protection, the Government Accountability Project in the United States says that you, Mr. Trudeau, have been the primary obstacle in blocking an overhaul of the laws protecting whistleblowers because of the scandals you have faced personally. What's your response to this?
As a government, we have consistently stood up for openness and transparency and brought forward reforms that have supported people coming forward to highlight wrongdoing in workplaces or institutions across the country. We will continue to do just that.
My follow-up question will be from me. You said that you need to hear the details. The details we do know is that in Quebec, there will be significant financial penalties for people who don't get vaccinated. Is that in itself a violation of the Canada Health Act? And would you consider clawing back healthcare transfers for that violation?
We're not going to descend into hypotheticals right now. We have been assured by the Quebec government that they intend to stand by the principles and the rules around the Canada Health Act as they move forward. So we continue to wait to look for details on this. But as we've said, incentives and strong measures, whether it's vaccine passports, whether it's requirements for travelers, whether it's the requirements for public servants to be fully vaccinated. We have taken very strong measures in the past, and they have worked in terms of keeping Canadians safe and getting Canadians vaccinated. We will continue to look and work with the provinces, look at measures put forward and work with the provinces and territories to do everything we can to continue to keep Canadians safe and get through this the best possible way we can.
Hi, Erica Ibrahim, the Canadian Press. Prime Minister, how can you justify promising to give Canadians fourth doses when many people in developing countries have not yet had a single dose? And is Canada applying the same pressure for manufacturers to deliver donated doses as it is for vaccines for our own use? And are you comfortable hoarding vaccines at the expense of less fortunate countries?
Let us be very clear. Canadians, and indeed the Canadian government, know full well that we don't end this pandemic anywhere until it ends everywhere. Omicron is an example of that, that new variants can come anywhere out of the world and cause disruption everywhere around the world. That's why from the very beginning, Canada has stepped up with as a significant contributor to COVAX, to the ACT Accelerator. We've made commitments on donating tens of millions of doses, and indeed have flowed tens of millions of doses that we bought for Canadians to people around the world. We will continue to step up in ensuring that everyone around the world gets vaccinated, even as we make sure that we are able to keep Canadians safe. The two things aren't in opposition, they go together. Our responsibility as a government is to ensure that we have the procurement necessary if there is a need for future boosters or future doses. But in the meantime, we continue to work with the international community to make sure that we're stepping up on vaccinations around the world so we can end this pandemic around the world.
And my follow-up is, the Ukraine government would like to see Canada confirm its willingness to extend the NATO mission of 200 Canadian forces trainers beyond the end of March as a show of Canadian solidarity to the NATO alliance. President Zelensky asked you about this yesterday. Why can't the government make this small commitment to NATO's larger efforts in Eastern Europe?
I had an outstanding conversation with President Zelensky of Ukraine yesterday, reiterated Canada's long-standing support and friendship for Ukraine, condemned in no uncertain terms the Russian aggression and buildup of troops. We are all extremely concerned about that and are united as allies around the world in calling on Russia to de-escalate and indicating that there will be significant consequences in the form of sanctions if further aggressive actions are taken by Russia. We are proud that Canada is leading a NATO mission in the Baltic states, in Latvia. We are part of Operation Unifier on the ground in Ukraine, training Ukrainian soldiers. We will continue to be there to stand as part of our NATO allies with our friends in the region.
Last question in the room.
Fraser Needham from APTN National News. This question is for the Prime Minister as well. As you know, there's a major COVID outbreak going on in the Bearskin Lake First Nation in Northern Ontario. On December 30th, they made it pretty clear that they wanted military assistance to deal with the situation. They're doing various tasks. It took more than a week for the government to actually respond, and now what's happened is they've activated 4 local Canadian Rangers, which were already in the community. So saying that the military has been deployed is being a bit generous with the truth, I think. Do you think this is a sufficient response from your government?
I would actually refer you to Indigenous Services Minister Haidu's statement on this, which details the resources on the ground in Bearskin Lake, including Canadian Rangers, including workers who've been paid for by Indigenous services to come in from nearby communities, volunteers on the ground as well. Our response is extremely present in Bearskin Lake, and we're pleased to see the situation turning a corner and looking like it's getting better, but we will continue to be there in that community and in communities around the country as necessary.
Yeah, it's fair enough, and that's the response that we have gotten from emailed statements from Mr. Blair's office and also Patty Havey. But the reality is that people on the ground say that that is not the case. They feel that they've been let down by the government, that government has not responded in a way that they expected. They say the relationship is fractured. And one thing that is not really clear is why the government of Ontario actually has to make a request for the military to go in or to be deployed when it's actually, that Ottawa deals directly with First Nations. It falls under federal jurisdiction. Are you going to maybe look into this maybe and sort of, you said your government wants to avoid these types of red tape situations. It seems exactly what they're falling into. Are you going to look into this, maybe see if it could be handled in a more efficient manner?
I think it's important to remember that from the very beginning of this pandemic, the focus of this federal government was on ensuring that Indigenous communities, which we'd seen during previous pandemics like H1N1, are particularly vulnerable, which is why from March 2020 onwards, we gave particular focus and emphasis on supporting Indigenous communities through this difficult pandemic. We saw case numbers much lower in Indigenous communities through those first waves. We saw initiatives like the flowing of additional vaccines to Indigenous communities and northern and remote communities to be able to keep people safer quicker. Were initiatives that all Canadians and indeed all premiers got behind to make sure we were supporting Indigenous people. Over the course of the past 2 years, we've continued to be there to respond as best we can to exigencies and emergencies, and we will continue to understand just how vulnerable Indigenous communities are to health challenges like this one, and we'll continue to work with them in the best possible way to keep their citizens safe.
Donc, on me dit qu'il nous reste un peu de temps pour aller au téléphone. Opérateur.
Thank you, merci. You may press star 1 if you have a question. Vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. La première question au téléphone est de Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau. J'aimerais revenir sur la contribution santé du gouvernement Legault. Je comprends que vous voulez pas trop spéculer, mais je veux juste revenir sur l'aspect de la loi sur la santé. Je comprends que Québec vous a assuré que leurs mesures respecteraient la loi sur la santé, mais au-delà de ça, j'aimerais vous entendre. Voyez-vous d'autres possibles entorses en matière de droit, ou au contraire, êtes-vous, dans le fond, satisfait après avoir fait pareil, vous, au fédéral, comme vous nous l'avez rappelé, et après que votre ministre de la Santé a essentiellement invité les provinces là, à faire de même en termes de vaccination obligatoire?
Je suis pas entièrement certain que je comprends tout à fait la question, Marie, mais nous sommes...
Voulez-vous que je la répète pour ne pas la gaspiller, s'il vous plaît?
Non, écoutez...
Je comprends que Québec vous a rassuré qu'il respecterait la loi sur la santé, mais au-delà de ça, est-ce que, à vos yeux, il y a des entorses qui ont l'air de poindre à l'horizon en matière de droit? Ou est-ce qu'au contraire, vous voyez ça d'un assez bon œil, puisque vous avez fait pareil là, au fédéral en termes de vaccination obligatoire?
Oui, non, la question est la même. La réalité, c'est que nous allons toujours veiller au respect des droits et des valeurs fondamentaux dans toute proposition que nous faisons, que d'autres personnes, d'autres provinces ou d'autres paliers de gouvernement vont faire. C'est toujours une préoccupation pour nous. On va regarder les détails de la proposition pour voir exactement ce qu'ils sont en train de proposer, pour mieux comprendre comment ça va fonctionner. Mais je peux dire effectivement que nous avions pris des mesures très fortes pour encourager les gens de se faire vacciner. Les provinces ont pris des mesures très fortes déjà. Alors, il n'y a pas une opposition de la part du gouvernement à ce qu'on prenne des mesures fortes, mais nous allons toujours chercher à ce que ces mesures soient efficaces, soient dans le respect des principes et des valeurs et puissent nous faire avancer. C'est pour ça que les détails sont aussi importants.
Il y a beaucoup de gens au Canada anglais, cela dit, qui sont un peu scandalisés, là, ou à tout le moins émotifs face à l'annonce de Québec. Vous êtes visiblement d'accord, vous, avec le principe, vous venez de le confirmer. Pourquoi est-ce que vous refusez d'aller plus loin ouvertement, puis que vous réfugiez un peu là dans le fait qu'on manque encore de détails? Pourquoi ne pas être plus clair dans votre opinion, si ce n'est parce que vous risquez un contre-coup au Canada anglais? Est-ce que c'est juste ça?
Je pense que, loin de pouvoir dire, je comprends, c'est plus facile d'écrire de faire les manchettes avec des réponses simplistes, mais c'est des enjeux extrêmement complexes, Marie. Comment on va équilibrer le respect des droits et des libertés fondamentaux, le respect d'une loi importante et fondamentale comme la loi canadienne sur la santé, et en même temps encourager fortement des gens à continuer de se faire vacciner. C'est des préoccupations que nous avions eues quand on a avancé les mesures d'exiger la vaccination pour des voyageurs aériens, par exemple. Quand on a exigé que les fonctionnaires de la fonction publique se fassent vacciner, les détails sont importants. On doit connaître exactement les mesures qu'on met de l'avant et il y a du travail à faire là-dessus. Alors, c'est pas pour éviter de répondre à la question, c'est de dire réellement, on a besoin de savoir quelles seront les modalités de cette proposition de Québec pour pouvoir s'assurer que ça soit efficace, que ça fasse la bonne chose et que ça soit en lien avec les principes et les valeurs qui nous sont chers.
On dit que c'est tout le temps qu'on avait avec le premier ministre. Les ministres resteront avec nous pour environ 15 minutes. J'aimerais quand même donner la chance à nos amis au téléphone.